Morning, everybody. Thank you very much for chiming in for the December edition of NCTA's On Track Live meeting. I expect we might have a little bit of a lighter crowd this week because of the holidays, as you can see from Melinda's festive background. As you all know, we record these sessions, and a lot of people have taken to chiming in later and listening to them like a podcast. So that's always an option if it doesn't work for your schedule. But we appreciate everybody being here. Don't have a ton of news to report today for our little news updates. Things in Washington are very interesting with the transition coming on, and we want to get right into the discussion with our special guest here today. I would like to note for everybody, though, to make sure your calendar's marked for the NCTA Spring and Operations and Maintenance Conferences. They'll be May 19th through 21. Or 22, excuse me, May 19 to 22. We'll be running the spring and O&M conferences concurrently this year, and also adding a short course to the first day, which would be a Rail Shipper 101 program that would be very interesting for folks who want to brush up, or if you've got new people coming into your organization, it'll be a nice training option. So May 19 to 22, we'll be opening registration for that after we enter the new year here. But make sure you've got that blocked off on your calendars. Without further ado, let's get into the discussion, because things are really dynamic now, and we're very fortunate to have with us today Christian Palich to offer some insights on what we might be seeing inside the Beltway coming next year. Christian is vice president at Eagle Forge Services Company right now, an NCTA member, one of the largest coal producers in the country, and appreciate his membership and his support that way. But we're really leaning on his political background here today. Christian started out working for a very well placed congressman who we regret is no longer there, Bill Johnson. Spent some time on Capitol Hill, then became president of the Ohio Coal Association for a good long while. Then in the last Trump administration, served two Senate approved roles. First as Congressional Affairs Liaison over at the Environmental Protection Agency, and then after in a senior position in the Interior Department so he's got great experience, great insight into how the agencies work, and has lived through Trump 1.0, and now we get to talk about Trump 2.0 and see where things are going from there. Christian gets around a lot. He's also president of the Wyoming Mining Association, president of the Washington, D.C. Coal Club, sits on the board of directors of the Ohio Coal Association and the American Coal Council. So busy guy. We're very pleased to have him with us. So Christian, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks, John. It's great to be with everyone, and I'm just happy we get to talk about a Trump 2.0 administration. So it's great time. Really great holiday season. The transition is all fired up. So I want to start off here. I'm going to go through some things I wanted to talk to you all about that I think could be interesting to NCTA's membership. Some things from our company perspective we're tracking in Washington and across the country with President Trump coming into office on January 20th. And then honestly want to have a discussion. Hope some folks got some questions. John, hope you got some questions. I like to be interactive, not just hear me talk. Everybody, nobody wants to hear that for too long. So won't take too much time here, and then we'll kind of dive in and have a discussion. But I figure a good place to start is kind of let's see where we're at since November 5th, and then kind of go from there. So starting out, President Trump's hit the ground running. And one thing I would note a little bit difference, and you'll hear me maybe in this discussion talk about the difference between 2016-17 transition and 24-25 transition. I think even President Trump would say, it wasn't it was a bit of a surprise. Maybe not everybody was thinking he would win in 2016. So the transition and some of the meetings just hadn't happened like they're happening now. And it's been a much smoother, much more prepared transition this time. So we already have folks in key positions that matter to coal and transportation in place. Let's start with EPA, perhaps the most important one. As a coal company, we don't make money if there's no one burning coal. So we need EPA to have regulations to keep our customers in business. So Administrator Lee Zeldin was nominated by President Trump for Senate confirmation, former congressman from New York. Congressman Zeldin has been a leader on so many issues, just an absolute smart guy. He almost won the governorship in New York, which is unheard of as a Republican because he's such a smart, talented person. I think he's going to bring a lot to the Environmental Protection Agency. And having worked there in congressional affairs, my job was to run the Senate for the administrator and for the administration in the first Trump administration. And it's so important how that Capitol Hill relationships happen, right? You need to have the folks on in the Senate and the House authorizing the great work that EPA is doing. So, being a former congressman, I'm really excited about Administrator Zeldin. Now, in Congress, he didn't really serve on energy committees or anything like that. So, I think it's going to be really fun to talk to him about all the issues that we care about, both from a transportation and a coal producer perspective. And we're going to dive a little bit more into the policy here in a second, too, from EPA. Also, Governor Doug Burgum, no secret to energy. He's also, President Trump named him the energy czar. He's going to be the Secretary of the Department of Interior. Governor Burgum has been an absolute leader on energy. Coal state, oil and gas state, totally understands everything on this call. I think he's going to be a leader from day one on federal lands issues, energy issues, the federal coal program, oil and gas leasing, federal coal leasing. So really excited for Governor Burgum and what he's going to bring. And then he's overseeing kind of the whole energy czar cabinet, bringing all these people together to figure out what regulations, what things helps unlock, as President Trump talks about, energy dominance. So I think Governor Burgum is going to be a terrific addition to the cabinet. Then Department of Energy, Chris Wright, former CEO, oil and gas CEO, Secretary nominee Wright is going to be awesome. I mean, he's one of us, right? A private sector guy, understands how to make a balance book in the energy industry. So I think he's going to be fantastic over the Department of Energy, which is a place where there's a lot of funding in future technologies, both on oil and gas and coal, and kind of unlocking those potentials that we have in that area as well. So the three main cabinet positions that involve energy are with people that are absolute experts and great people to communicate, both the folks in Washington and across the country, working with governors, state houses, and just communities on President Trump's energy dominance agenda. Also, I think it's smart to talk on this call, coal transportation. You know, as a coal company in Wyoming, as well as West Virginia, we rely on the railroads to get our coal to our customers. We don't get paid if that coal doesn't hit the rail car. So Secretary of Transportation nominee, former Congressman Sean Duffy, I think will also be terrific. That Hill communication, you kind of see what President Trump's doing. He's putting people in that can communicate really well and served with former members or their former members and served with a lot of these folks in power. I think the Department of Transportation is going to really look to unlock American potential, especially in the coal world, because they know how important transportation issues are. As a coal company, we've been tracking these issues, and several pieces of coal-related legislation as it involves rail. For the last couple of years, we've seen several of those pieces of legislation. I think Secretary nominee Duffy is going to dive in right away and try to make sure we have the most efficient rail system in the country, because of how vital it is, not just for our industry, but for farming and agriculture, petrochemicals, and many other industries as well. So as we look at those key nominees, and I also have to mention, I'm from Ohio. I live here in Columbus, Ohio. Vice President-elect Senator J.D. Vance, we're very excited about. Absolutely a terrific guy. He's an energy guy. We supported him here in Ohio as a coal industry. He's been to coal mines. He gets it. He's an energy guy. Having him in the vice president's office with President Trump is going to be an absolute asset to everybody on this call, the things we're doing. So I think the leadership all the way from the president down through the cabinet officials is going to be terrific for what we all do. So with that, let's talk some first 100 days. What can we expect starting at January 20th at noon through the springtime up until really when you guys meet in your meeting in May? I think that'll be a very good meeting, because we're going to see a lot of movement in that first 100 days of the Trump administration. EPA. One of the most egregious rules that affects our customers as a coal company is the Clean Power Plan 2.0, which was, of course, built off President Obama's Clean Power Plan 1 back from 2015. First Trump administration at EPA, we wrote the Affordable Energy Act, which really took that away, allowed customers to stay open, burning coal, burning natural gas even, to have that baseload energy. And of course, the Biden-Harris administration came in, appeased their radical environmental donors, and did Clean Power Plan 2.0. Now, we've challenged this from the courts. We've done several pushbacks against this issue, mostly, honestly, legally, because legislatively, we haven't had Congress, right? We're going to get there. That's also a good news story now, but it hasn't been the last 4 years. We've always had one branch controlled by non-coal friendly Democrats. And for the Senate, it's been that for a while now. So we've tried to push back. I will gotta say, Senator Capito, West Virginia is fantastic, as well as Congresswoman Carol Miller. They had the Save the Power Plants Act that was to get rid of the Clean Power Plan 2.0. Obviously went nowhere because we didn't control Congress. But now, with control of Congress, with Administrator Zeldin hopefully getting a quick confirmation of EPA, which we expect, we can unwind this regulatorily. And I think that's a first 100-day thing. I think you'll see EPA pull that back from the air office. And then I think the next question is, what kind of tactic comes out of EPA on coal? Do we rewrite a rule that allows for baseload energy to stay online, coal plants, natural gas, nuclear, or do we just ignore it for 4 years? Do we just kind of say, hey, they're doing great? That's philosophical discussion the administrator will have with the National Economic Council and the president and his energy advisors. There is discussion. You never know. I know in Trump administration 1, there are people encouraging look at the endangerment finding from Massachusetts first EPA. Could that be something that the president decides to do in the second Trump administration here as well, which would take CO2 away as a particulate pollutant? So there's several ways you'll see it, but the most important thing we need is for it to go away. And I think that's an immediate 100-day thing that you'll see Administrator Zeldin do. Also, I won't dive in and bore everyone with several other regulations, but there's several good neighbor rule, which hurts many states that burn coal. The coal ash rule, which hurts many legacy coal plants across the country that the Biden-Harris administration continued to push forward. All of those rules will be rewritten, pulled back from EPA, I think, very quickly. So what you'll see there is hopefully you'll see many coal plants delay their retirements because of what we're seeing from the administration very early on. And that EPA really affects our customers strongly. So all positive stuff from EPA in the first 100 days. Department of Interior, let's move on to that. Secretary Burgum, again, I see no issues with confirmation, both with Zeldin or Burgum. Should be fairly quick, to be honest. Seeing widespread support there. Secretary Burgum's going to come in, and one of the first things he's going to do is something that really affects us out west as a coal company, is the resource management plans that BLM's put forward. You have the Miles City one in Montana. You have the Buffalo RMP, which affects us that have coal mines in Gillette, Wyoming, and as well as the Rock Springs RMP that affects several other industries that use rail, not per se coal, in the Rock Springs area. There's some coal, a lot of Trona, bentonite out that way. So those resource management plans essentially have no new coal leasing. It says you cannot lease coal. Even if we want to, it's marketable after 2041. So as I put it, and as I've talked in Gillette, and I am honored to be the president, as John mentioned, of the Wyoming Mining Association this year, as we talk to folks, it literally puts a death date on the city of Gillette because it's a coal town. Anybody, and I assume many folks in this call have been there, it's a great town and it is based on coal. And what the Biden-Harris administration did with their resource management plan is put a death date on that town. And that, to me, is very sad. And we expect Interior to tackle that. You're going to have to go through rulemaking. There's a process there, but there's definitely a push to get rid of those. Combine that with a Capitol Hill aspect of folks like Congresswoman Hageman, Senators Barrasso and Lummis, as well as Senator-elect Sheehy coming in with Senator Daines, that they want to get rid of these resource management plans to allow companies to lease coal if we would like through 2041. And many of us companies are interested. So Congressional Review Act on the Capitol Hill side for those, but it's going to come very heavy from whoever's the BLM director, as well as Secretary nominee Burgum from Interior. So that's one of the main things I think is going to be a very early tackling, because it's going to send a great signal to places like Campbell County, Wyoming, that we're back in business and we need to be able to move forward. And it's really anecdotally, I grew up in the Eastern coal fields, right? Our company also mines in West Virginia, so I'm very familiar with Eastern coal, being here in Ohio and working here. It's just really sad what we've seen back east because a lot of these regs since Barack Obama in 2009. So these resource management plans, we've seen these kinds of issues come back east in a different way because we don't have federal coal. There was Clean Power Plan 1 or some of the ESA abuses we've seen over the last decade. So now they've made their way out west and they've figured out how they can kill these communities, these coal communities, through these resource management plans. And I've told folks we've seen this back east. in Harrison County, Ohio, and Raleigh County, West Virginia. And we want to make sure that that does not happen because it is a human crisis and it's really, quite frankly, sad. So there's going to be good news coming very early in the administration on that. Also, off the surface mining, 10-day notice rule is going to be a top of the mind, first 100-day priority you'll see in the Land and Minerals Management Hallway. What that does is affect how state regulators deal, but more than any deal with SMCRA and the federal government. Really what that does is it allows environmental groups to do very many complaints, and it gives 10 days for states to abate those issues, but it allows the feds way more control, which is obviously way out of the spirit of SMCRA. All the states signed up against this rule. We redid it in Trump administration 1 when I was the Department of Interior, that allowed the states to regulate their coal programs because they're closest to the ground on some of these alleged violations. And the Biden-Harris administration wrote it so that the federal government, bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. were the ones deciding violations. Obviously, as a company, we want to make sure we're following the law, but we also want to make sure folks in DC are working with state partners as SMCRA intended. So that was a terrible rule, and you'll see Secretary Burgum tackle that very early on. I want to mention too, perhaps a little bit off coal, but just something I think people might be interested in is critical minerals. I think that'll also be a thing you're going to see really a lot of focus on early on from Secretary Burgum. And that comes, could that affect, coal seams, rare earth minerals in our coal seams, or just critical minerals and how we do that as a country, lithium and others. I think that's going to be a real focus because we're getting killed by China in many ways on that. We have all the things here if we can mine it. And I think that's going to be a huge focus by the president and Secretary Burgum. So maybe not super coal related on our production side, but kind of coal related. But I did want to mention I think critical minerals would be a priority. And then DOE, I won't spend a ton of time on. I think the biggest thing at DOE you'll see early is Secretary nominee Wright will take a look and see how maybe we can repurpose some of the IRA funding that went towards the renewable side and how we can use that more on the fossil side. Maybe even taking that money as, I'm sure the attorneys will dive in and figure out how we can repurpose that to the Department of Fossil Energy instead of the Department of Renewable Energy, and how we can do future coal technologies, which I think is important to everybody on this call. What does the coal industry look like 20, 30 years from now? And I think you're going to see DOE really lean into that. There's a lot of appropriated dollars we've seen through the IRA that I think, as someone that lobbied strongly against that bill for several reasons, I think we can see that money, what doesn't get repealed, and that'll be Congress deciding if there is allocated appropriated money, can we use that to help the folks on this call, coal industry, instead of some of our competitors in the renewable side. So I think it's something that Secretary nominee Wright will take a look at very early on. Next, got to talk about Congress. Great news story there. We do control all of Congress, coal-friendly Republicans, which is terrific. Although the House, I say control, it is a tight majority. So I've been joking, any one day, one member of the House could be a Joe Manchin and create their own caucus of one. So it's going to be a real adventure with Speaker Johnson, which we're seeing even this week on the CR vote. So stay tuned on the government funding we're looking at. So nevertheless, we control those areas. And I want to talk about some key committees and people that matter in Congress that are going to be so key to President Trump's early agenda. On the House side, Energy and Commerce has Kentucky Republican Brett Guthrie will be the chairman. Terrific guy, coal state guy. Energy and Commerce is really going to lead on so many issues on the coal side and the environment side. So they have oversight over EPA, which is so important. So the hearings, I think, are going to be terrific and things you really want to watch because our priorities are going to be front and center. The other one, for those of us that have federal coal that really matters, is continuing to have Chairman Bruce Westerman of Arkansas. Absolute leader, terrific guy. He's been a leader in the House, both in the minority and the majority, on federal coal issues. He's going to continue to serve in that role in this next Congress. So between his oversight will be more DOI side. So you have authorizers on the DOI side, you have authorizers on the EPA side, working together with the White House in conjunction in that trifecta, as we're calling it right now, of pro-energy folks with a energy dominance agenda. And I'm very excited to see that what'll happen. I think you're going to see a lot of hearings promoting what President Trump does early on. So it'll be fun to watch those hearings. When you're sitting in your office, get on your live stream and listen to the witnesses you'll see in Energy and Commerce, as well as House Natural Resources, talking about the priorities of President Trump and how legislatively we can codify these wins that they're so that way they're long term, not just short term regulatory fixes. And I think that's a theme you're going to see, and that's something you're hearing in the transition a lot across the Capitol to the Senate side. Senator Shelley Moore Capito, who we all know is such a great leader on coal and a terrific person, is going to be chairwoman of the Environment and Public Works Committee. She's a rock star. She's awesome. I mentioned earlier how she had the Congressional Review Act legislation to end Clean Power Plan 2.0. Again, you with EPA oversight from Senator Capito, I'm very confident that she will be holding hearings talking about all the things in the coal industry as well as energy dominance agenda. And then on the energy and natural resources side, Senator Lee of John's home state of Utah, who is terrific, federal coal guy. Actually met with his team yesterday. They are ready to roll. Huge coal supporters, huge energy dominance supporters. So Senator Lee is going to be an absolute leader over there as well, which is great. So we're happy he has a gavel. So the Senate and the House working together, working with the White House in conjunction, I think will be very important early on. Now, that all leads into, and you've heard this term, reconciliation bill, right? We're hearing there's going to be 2 reconciliation bills. All that's not completely decided. There might be one. Some very prominent members of the House and Senate think there should be one just because of the tight majorities in the House. But right now, the Speaker is saying, as well as incoming Senate Majority Leader Thune, that there's going to be 2 reconciliation bills. And what that means is you just need a simple majority to pass it, right? You don't need the 60 votes in the Senate we all hear about. There will be energy. If there's one bill, there will be energy issues in it. If there's 2 bills, there will be a tax bill and an energy border bill as well. It's just going to be how they divide it. And some of the things we're looking at there, federal coal royalty rates. It is completely out of whack with the current market. Unfortunately, we don't mine 1 billion tons of coal in this country anymore. We have a much different market and a much different coal industry. We have to look at the federal coal program. So I see several provisions going into a reconciliation bill that right sizes the tax base of the federal coal market. And companies like ours and many others that operate on the federal lands are going to be looking at that closely. We're working with our senators. We have the whip of the United States Senate, which is the second highest positions, Senator John Barrasso, who's a rock solid coal supporter from Wyoming. So you're going to see leadership in both the Senate and in the House pushing for a right sizing of the tax base of the federal coal program with several provisions in reconciliation, which we're very excited about. And I think that changes the dynamics and marketability of our industry long term. So our customers, hopefully with the EPA side, are delaying closures, seeing that we have an energy crisis in this country because of AI and because of data centers, and we're already straining our grid by taking baseload electricity offline. We can make sure we have the power through the federal coal program to power those plants long term. So I think reconciliation will be the most important thing to watch very early on. And President Trump's team's already engaging every day during the transition with congressional leaders on that. Other thing I want to mention, so everyone's heard DOGE, the Department or the Government Efficiency, right? The Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. I had the picture of the meme, right? The crypto meme in my head. So the Department of Government Efficiency led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, another Ohio guy, right? One thing about us Ohio folks, we always have to shout out other Ohio people. It's a rule. So Vivek is an Ohio guy, so I had to say that. And so it's interesting to see. I don't have a ton of insight on that just because it's a new bureau. I think it's a great bureau. You have congressional and Senate caucuses on DOGE. So it's going to be really great to see how they define government efficiency. And as it matters for energy, I can name a lot, being in energy a long time. I can name a lot of things that are not efficient in government and stuff I witnessed in the first Trump administration. So I'm happy to speak to Mr. Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy about things that we can make more efficient, probably starting with some of the workforce that we see in Washington. But it'll be interesting to see how they work with Congress and the White House to implement the things that they're going to find out on the efficiency side. I think energy is a place that they're going to start because we do see a lot of waste and duplicative regulations within the world that we all live in on this call. With the and then moving on to the White House side, there will be executive orders on day one. And I think an energy one will be coming, specifically on energy security. Energy matters. We have to have energy to be secure in this country. I think you're going to see a EO that mentions coal, natural gas, nuclear, that says we must keep what we have as baseload electricity and build more so that we have a safe and secure energy grid in this country. Talks about the growing energy load, which we see every single day. Anecdotally, I was watching Squawk Box this morning on CNBC, and the CEO of Georgia Power was on talking about the incredibly high energy load that the state of Georgia is seeing with economic development, which is great. We all want economic development, but we have to power that economic development. And I think that's going to be vital. So an energy security executive order that goes through the National Economic Council, I think will be a very early on thing the White House does. And then the other thing the White House is going to do is President Trump's going to keep his promise and pull us out of the Paris Climate Agreement again. After Biden and Harris put us back in it in this last administration. Nobody follows these rules. China doesn't, all our adversaries. All that does is put us at a competitive disadvantage. As President Trump so aptly says, we're going to pick Pittsburgh over Paris. And I think he's going to say something very similar. I think you'll see him pull out of that Paris Climate Agreement very early on in the administration as well, which, if nothing else, sends market signals that is, quite frankly, very important. I'll close with this and then start the conversation. As a coal company, we're so excited because we're seeing in the news, we're talking to customers, there's coal plant closures. I think people are more likely to want to talk coal contracts long-term today than they were on November 4th. And it's really exciting time. If anything else, it's just the momentum that we're seeing that we have a pro-coal administration, a group that will listen to us, right? Not shun us away and listen to many of our adversaries that try to shut our minds down. Just that attitude alone for the next 4 years is something that we can all take solace in. And although, no one agrees 100% of the time, at least having an audience that will listen to the ideas that we all have as a coal industry, as a transportation industry, is absolutely invaluable and quite frankly, really exciting. And also the permitting ability that we're going to see from folks that want to permit coal, want to permit natural gas, nuclear, all those things, right? People that want to permit these things and people that don't seek to shut us down. We heard a lot about permitting bills as we've been in lame duck here over the last couple of weeks about the Barrasso Mansion permitting bill. And my whole theory is the best permitting reform is just having people there that want to actually give you a fair shake. And that's what we're going to have starting at noon on January 20th, which I think is a new day for the energy industry. Coal has a bright future. I've never been the one to be negative, and quite frankly, had Kamala Harris won, I would have still thought we were going to have a great industry because you can't get rid of us because of baseload power. But I'll tell you what, we're really excited that President Trump won and believes in what we're doing, and we're so excited to work with him. So I gave kind of a 30,000 foot view there. As you probably could tell, I'm very excited. Our company's very excited. Our leadership team believes in the industry, and we're ready to go to work with the president and support him and what he needs. And we're excited to hopefully be mining coal for another 100 years in this country. So, John, with that, take questions, conversations. I'm an open book.
Great overview, Christian. Really appreciate that. I've got a ton of questions, but I won't hog the conversation if other people have them too. I've got the chat box open if you want to type in questions that way. Feel free to do it, or do the raise your handy thingy, or unmute yourself and barge in. Happy to take questions from the group.
Just yell at me.
Yeah. Just don't call him late for dinner, right?
I know that.
Maybe to kick it off, maybe real quick, Christian, explain to the group what reconciliation means, how you get to that. You can do it in 50 votes and not filibuster it, as opposed to needing a 2/3 majority to get through the Senate. So.
Yeah, it's essentially it has to deal with federal government revenue. So it has to be a revenue neutral bill. So what it's all going to come in is the Congressional Budget Office and how they score bills, right? And reconciliation, it has to have something to do. So as I talked about federal coal royalty rates or black lung excise tax or many of these or abandoned mine land fees or any of the taxes we pay, bonus bids, that brings revenue into the federal government through the federal coal program or just as a tax, right? So looking at those things, that's why it's germane to a reconciliation bill, which is really just tax reconciliation. So that's why you don't need the 60 vote threshold. But the challenge is you do have to prove that it's revenue neutral now, which our arguments are going to be, and they're correct arguments, quite frankly, that we're going to talk to our friendly members of Congress and the Congressional Budget Office about is if you right size our tax base, as any other industry in this country should have a right sized tax base, we're going to be revenue neutral because we're going to mine more coal. We're going to increase production. If you take away the burdensome regulations on our customers, we have a runway of a lot longer. So when you had the RMP I talked about, put a death date of 2041, well, guess what? If you get rid of that, combined with putting our tax base to the right size of the market, we can mine coal through 2070. And that's going to bring way more federal government revenue in for the coal program than short term. And I always say, you hear the Democrats talk about fair return to taxpayers, right? And they claim we don't pay our fair share. Well, here's what they don't understand. If they put us out of business, you know what's not a fair return to taxpayer? $0. Because you put us out of business, we're not mining coal, we're not paying any royalty rate, we're not paying any AML fee, we're not paying any black lung excise tax. There is no fees coming into the government. They don't care. They just want to put us out of business. So through reconciliation, we right size the tax base. We're going to bring federal government revenue in, get that fair return to taxpayers, get the fair return to the states that have the resource. And we want to pay our fair share, but we also have to have it be fair. And that's the most important thing. So reconciliation is a challenge. But somehow the Democrats and Chuck Schumer figured out how to get the IRA through. So I know our smart people in leadership will figure out how to get our priorities through as well.
Right. Kind of related to that. I mean, you mentioned that the benefit of getting things done through Congress is once it's in statute, you're not subject to this whipsaw effect of this administration to that administration decide to change the rules. This is an idea I just wanted to bounce off you, Christian, to get off get your opinion on it. You mentioned the Department of Government Efficiency. The Ramaswamy Musk effort, which is not going to be a real department, right? It's going to be an ad hoc, informal thing that has a broad mandate to look at everybody's department. Do you think which is going to be the bigger effect of what DOGE is doing? Is it going to be actually getting departments to make changes, or is it going to be helping to force some of these congressional changes? Because as they find places that are inefficient, it's because Congress was who authorized all that money. Which do you think is going to work more?
Yet to be seen. I think they're going to find. Here's what my hope is, right? And this is Christian Pallage talking. I'm not Elon Musk. I could never build a rocket. I can assure you that. So I don't want to speak for Mr. Musk or Ramaswamy, but what I would say is here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping when they find an inefficiency, they figure out what the source of the inefficiency is. If that is Congress, right? If that's say, hey, X committee, here's a piece of legislation passed in 81. Here's how it's been changed and used to affect regulation. Let's go back and look at it. So they go back to an authorizing committee and they go, let's fix this. Or maybe it's an executive solution as well, or they can go to the NEC or go to CEQ or go to one of these groups and say, here's the original source of the issue. Let's fix it through the executive branch, which, let's be honest, is more efficient because it doesn't go through Congress. Hopefully they figure out the source and move from there to solve the problem, right? It's almost like a doctor figuring out, you got to figure out what the symptom is and what the original cause of the disease is so you can then treat it. And I am hoping they do that. And honestly, it's going to be both, John, a lot too. Congress did X, probably didn't fill in all the blanks. Executive branch took and ran with it. Like I'm thinking Clean Water Act and WOTUS and Clean Air Act issues, for energy is what I know. So hopefully it's those things is what they're going to do. It might take both, might take one of the branches. It might take an agency on the executive side, maybe not even the White House, but yet to be seen. I don't think we'll know the full aspect of DOGE or how that all works until early on in the administration when the president gets sworn in.
Yeah, interesting stuff. You also mentioned I know one of the things that I think DOGE is going to be looking at, but a lot of others too, is sort of the federal workforce. I mean, what things do you see coming there in terms of staffing? Yeah.
So having worked in the Trump administration the first time, and had a staff at both EPA and Department of Interior, one of the biggest things, again, this is me speaking here, we need to move the bureaucracy out of Washington, D.C. in several areas, right? So, for example, I worked at Interior with the Office of Surface Mining that was located right there next to the White House, the Department of Interior. I asked so many of my employees who's been to a coal mine. Some had, many hadn't. Well, you regulate coal mining, okay? You don't regulate coal mining sitting next to the Sweet Green Salad Shop and Starbucks in DC. You need to be on the ground in places where you're mining coal. Same with many of the folks at EPA. If you are a person that oversees an industry, right? And again, we're talking about what we know on this call, but that goes for folks at the Commerce Department, Transportation Department. It's a lot harder to be a zealot and do regulations and put people out of work if you coach their kids' baseball team, if you go to the grocery store, if you see each other socially at the kids' school. It's a lot harder to put that industry out of business. And when I think of coal, right, if you have a Office of Surface Mining that regulates coal, and that place is located in coal country, where number one, you could probably hire a lot of coal miners who have unfortunately been put out of work by policies from Obama and Biden administrations. Those folks could regulate the industry they know best and follow the law. And they're also going to know what to look for. And they're also going to work with coal, or they're going to see coal miners socially in their communities because it's their communities, right? They're going to want to protect those. Moving the bureaucracy out of Washington, D.C. brings an entirely new workforce. And it's something I strongly believe in. It's something I brought up multiple times in the last administration. I think so many of us agree on this administration should look at moving the federal workforce bureaucracy, right? Some folks obviously need to stay there if your job is DC focused, but for so many people, it's not. Get out of DC, move to communities. It creates economic development in communities. It allows for better people to be hired in those communities than folks that are coming in to put forth a political agenda. And my old boss, Secretary David Bernhardt, who's an absolute leader, he moved the Bureau of Land Management to Grand Junction, Colorado. We did it. We know it works. We saw what happened with the workforce and how these regulations are promulgated when you have folks not living in Washington, D.C. in the echo chamber is vitally important. Because as someone that's spent the better part of 15 years in and out of Washington, D.C., I can assure you that it is not a place where good ideas start. So I want as many people out in the country that really have the good ideas to be a part of that workforce, and something I believe heavily in. And I really hope Doge and the president and many of the secretaries take a hard look of how they take their workforce and put it in communities across the country.
Do you think efforts even just to force a return to the office type policies is also going to have an effect on that career bureaucracy that we're dealing with?
Can everybody this call imagine if your boss just said, "Hey, I need you in the office," and you threw a fit, like what they would do? I know what my boss would say. It's kind of crazy. I mean, it's just crazy. Yeah, I mean, maybe if you're that mad that you're going to quit over having to go in the office for the first time in yeah, you probably shouldn't be working on important issues and getting paid by the taxpayers to serve the people. Yeah, hopefully, John. Right? I mean, hopefully that does fix something, and they should be working. They should be working for us. Look, telework's a fine thing for certain times, but you can't telework 5 days a week, 365. You just can't create a collaborative environment. The Zoom and the Teams can never replace the side talk you get in a hallway when you talk to your friends, or you talk to your work friends about stuff and the kids and the ball game last night. We need that to have an efficient workforce. So hopefully, yeah, that recalled office does solve some of those problems, John. But you never know.
Yeah, and one of the items we had in the newsletter, I mean, in the waning days of the Biden administration, the agencies are going out of their ways to lock down. A lot of people didn't realize a lot of the federal workforce is unionized, and so they're trying to lock in these work from home requirements while they have a chance now. Being somebody like you who tries to meet face to face with folks in the bureaucracy to build a relationship and so forth, it's been just crushingly difficult the last few years to even build a relationship with anybody because you're reduced to Zoom calls constantly.
Absolutely.
Sorry, you got me up on my horse there for that one.
Please, agree.
Let me go back to you mentioned when you were kind of doing the rundown on the cabinet secretary nominees that have been named now. You described them all, and I think correctly, as not only being strong on the subject matter, but also being good communicators. Maybe let's focus on Lee Zeldin at EPA. I mean, he'd be replacing the current EPA administrator is a career bureaucrat. He's a professional environmental regulator, that kind of thing. Now being replaced by a person who is a former congressman. I mean, having worked for cabinet secretaries directly, how important is that leadership skill piece versus maybe 30 years of experience in writing regulations?
When you're the head person, when you're a cabinet secretary, you're the quarterback of the team, right? Using a sports analogy, you have to communicate. You have to communicate to the Hill. You got to communicate to the people. It's so valuable. It's why President Trump is such a successful leader, is because he goes directly to the people and communicates with them. And I think you're going to see that from folks like Administrator Zeldin, who, he almost won the state of New York. He did better than any Republican statewide in New York has done for governor, because people believed in his message and people heard him communicate very complex issues, right? In the current age we live in with social media and 24/7 news, you got to put very complex issues, especially dealing with the environment. If to put those issues into the country's attention span, that's quite frankly very short, because we're constantly getting news and information. And I think having a former congressman, someone that can go in and communicate directly with the people, and then go up to Capitol Hill and meet with his former colleagues on these committees and say, here's what we're doing, and here's why we're doing it, and here's why it helps people in your district, or here to the public, why it helps people in your community. I think that's absolutely invaluable, right? And you got to be smart, you got to know the process, but you have a team for a lot of that too, right? I would want someone that can take these complex issues and make them very palatable as a communications discussion, over someone that sits in a room for 6 hours and pores over the Clean Air Act. Now, all of these people are very smart and can do that, but quite frankly, you don't have the time, right? You're dealing with a different issue every day. As someone that's worked with a cabinet official's schedule, their days are swamped with so many different issues. And you talk about, let's just take EPA, as you mentioned, John, for example. Your morning starts out maybe with a meeting with your team, and then your first two meetings could be on Superfund sites. Your meeting before lunch is on an enforcement issue. Your meeting at 2 is on the clean power plant and a coal issue. Your meeting later is on an international issue, like all the issues you're seeing with wastewater coming in from the borders in Canada and Mexico. You've just dealt with 6 different issues. You can't be an expert on all of them. You have to have a good team, and you have to be able to communicate those issues and why they matter to all parts of the country as well. And I think being a congressman, being a governor, being someone that specializes in, for lack of a better term, kind of talking and communicating, I think that just gives you a huge advantage. And it also helps with your team and your staff. And they appreciate when you can take their issues and their hard work and sell those issues to the people that, quite frankly, need to be sold on them and why it's good policy.
All right, let's talk about that team piece, because in the agency you've got the next tier of appointed folks who are going to be brought in to work with the new cabinet secretaries, and below that we've got the career staff, which I was using the phrase deep state many years ago, before the phrase deep state got stigmatized. I think it's real. I expect you think it's real too, Christian. Having been in that layer of the political appointees, how hard is it to deal with sort of the entrenched career bureaucracy, and is that another challenge that a good communicator at the top can overcome?
Yeah, it's a challenge. So as I tell folks, I'm the only one in my family in politics, right? So I get a lot of questions from friends and family, especially on Christmas Day or the other holidays are together, about politics. And the deep state conversation comes up. You see a lot and you hear a lot about deep state. It's not perhaps what you think, right? Where it's people just burying stuff and all these things, leaking to media. It's perhaps not as blatant as that. It's almost more what I noticed. The deep state exists in this way. We're just not going to work that hard to do this policy that the president wants or you want, right? It's really as simple as, I'm just going to take as much time, and if you're not pushing me, I don't have to complete it. And that's really what the deep state is. If you have someone on the team that is not ideologically aligned, which, let's be honest, the career employees of the EPA aren't sitting on this call talking about how great it is to keep coal burning electricity going in this country. If there is one of them, they're probably pretty quiet. Now, I will say, and I would never say their name, there are people that when I got an EPA, high-five me in private. And I'll actually tell a story about that in a second. But to finish answering the question, you will have the career employees, many of them are very dedicated, good people. I want to say that to be
Mhm.
clear too. There are many dedicated, smart, good people. But the problem is if they're not ideologically aligned, they're not going to help you. So the key is for the leadership, and as you see the assistant administrators for EPA or the assistant secretaries of Interior or Department of Energy, the key is to do your work, use the career folks as you need to use them, but focus on using the political appointees that are going to start trickling in over the first 100 days to 6 months. Use your colleagues to get those things done. Get the rules to OMB and OIRA. And look, the career employees are going to be there. If they become an impediment, you got to go around them. That is the key. You cannot let them be the impediment that they're going to try to do. And that's something I think we did do a good job in the first Trump administration. We tried to work with them when we could, and we also knew things that just were not going to work. And I think that's going to be very important. Now, my quick story is this. I was at work one day, and I won't even say which agency I was at the time, and I got a random text from one of our team members asking me to do lunch. And this gentleman shot me a text through the channels, and I go meet him. And he said to me, meet me on, it was like we had a lunch hall up like the sixth floor, and we were like on the second floor where our offices were. So I'm like, why are we going up here? It's because they didn't want to be seen talking to me as a political appointee for the press. He was that worried about how his colleagues would react to him having lunch with me. And he wanted to have lunch with me to tell me that he wanted to help. He said, I served the last administration, although I disagreed with them politically, but I believe in what you're doing and I want to be helpful. But I thought it was so sad that this gentleman could not have lunch with me, who was a senior political appointee at the agency, because he was so feared about the retribution from his career colleagues. That's an absolute true story and something I always cite to say there is a entrenched problem, to your question, John, when those things happen. Now, if the American people had spoke and elected President Harris, Vice President Harris, sorry, I don't definitely didn't get that promotion. I'm not saying that. Vice President Harris, then she would have had every right to have people that go into that administration and implement her agenda, although I would have disagreed with it. But
Right.
when we win and the American people overwhelmingly on November 5th voted for President Trump and JD Vance's agenda, those people have every right to implement that. So there should not be those issues where you should fear as a government employee talking to the people that were elected by the American people to do the regulations and carry out the president's agenda. So I think it is a problem, and I think the leadership need to push forward and implement the president's agenda.
Excellent. Remind everybody, we've got about 10 minutes left in the conversation here. I can keep Christian talking for hours, but if anybody does have a question, feel free to raise your hand now or type it into the chat box. Christian, any tea, we know who the cabinet secretaries are going to be. Any tea yet on how some of those next layer of political appointments in the agencies might be shaping up?
Yeah, I mean, you'll see those picks at the assistant secretary, assistant administrator level throughout the government start to trickle in. I think a lot of the cabinet secretaries are starting to meet with those folks. The transition team's meeting with them. I think a lot of it's going to kind of be over the holidays slower. You'll see folks trickle in. Watch the president's Twitter every day. You'll see the new hires coming out on Twitter. As I say, it ain't real till the president tweets it. So if you follow Twitter, you'll stay up to date on the hiring curve. But I think a lot of it's going to happen on January 20th. After the president's sworn in, you're going to see a robust presidential personnel office with leadership going throughout the agencies. You'll then start to see the White House liaisons trickle in and the landing teams to the agencies and the beachhead teams. And that's when you're really going to start seeing those levels of folks come in, John, that quite frankly are going to be so vital to pushing the president's agenda. Those names are already being formulated. And I think probably by early March, you'll have a really good team set up.
This is way faster than Trump 1.0. Am I correct?
It'll be faster. They're also, I think there's going to be a robust vetting process of making sure it's people that support President Trump's agenda 100% as well. I think they're going to want to be very tactical and careful who comes in because they realize the president has, quite frankly, 2 years with Congress to get a lot of things done and to earn the trust of the American people heading into a midterm election. So I think you're going to see people that are 100% dedicated to making President Trump and Vice President Vance successful.
Another phrase that kind of got stigmatized during the presidential campaign, that the Heritage Foundation led Project 2025 effort that came up with a very detailed 900 and some page outline of policy issues for a Trump administration to tackle. During the campaign, that I found it ironic that a lot of the media castigated Project 2025 for actually having a plan of what to do. The other side had a plan too. It just didn't have just didn't get stigmatized. But President Trump during the campaign sort of pushed that Project 2025 piece aside, but now that he's won, how much of that agenda do you think is going to make it back into the mix at this point?
That was a whole political issue. First off, President Trump has his own policies. President Trump's going to do what the president wants to do. I mean, I'm not breaking news on that. The president is a strong leader. He's got his own ideas on policy, and he's going to put people in place that agree with his policy. The whole Project 2025 thing is a scare tactic by the left. I mean, it's simple as that. This was a policy document done by a conservative organization with some former Trump administration officials who are conservative leaders. It's nothing. I mean, the president said it's not mine. I wasn't involved. It's true. I mean, the president's going to do what he's going to do. It was used as a political issue. Now, will there be policies that are in Project 2025? Yeah, but it has nothing to do with that they're written down in some Heritage Foundation playbook. It's that they're conservative policies that a conservative president and a conservative administration are going to push forward. So if you look at some of those energy sections, be like, well, we want energy dominance in coal and natural gas. It's like, well, of course, I was going to say every conservative. Most conservatives believe that. So it's going to be coincidentally in there, but the president's going to do what the president's going to do. So, yeah, I don't see that as a major issue. I think the left will try to make issues. Like if we do something as an administration that it was also in Project 2025, and see, we told you they're implementing it. And it's like, yeah, well, whether it was written down or not, that was going to happen. So yeah, that was all politics, quite frankly. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Kind of absurd when you think about it. I mean, energy dominance is the theme, right? I mean, next to the government efficiency effort, and then of course immigration is another huge issue. When was the last time we had an administration where energy was this high up on the agenda, and staring down the barrel of all the load growth we're facing from artificial intelligence and trying to electrify everything. I mean, this feels like this is a once in a generation opportunity. Am I wrong about that?
No, it is. We can't miss that. So the biggest takeaway I have, and it's something that our CEO talks to us as a team about all the time, is we have that opportunity. We're the dog who got the car. Let's hop in the car and let's go. I mean, we need to go forward and actually do something that protects the coal industry and the baseload energy industry in this country. Now, the last administration, I would say energy was this high, and I'll be honest, I wasn't alive for the election in 1980, but reading and being a historian of presidential politics was when we had the oil shortages and President Carter lost to President Reagan. I think it's the last time energy was such a hot button issue. But when you read everything, again, I saw this morning about the Georgia Power CEO. You read in the Wall Street Journal every day about our energy, the AI, and the data centers. We're facing an existential crisis in this country. We've also seen it happen with ERCOT. You're hearing all the RTOs talk about the problems we're seeing with load growth. PJM, MISO has said it. SPP said it. So we need as a country to have a real energy strategy, not based in fantasy land energy policies by folks that are in Ivy League schools, but people that really understand how you have a modern economic grid that is reliable and affordable, right? Because here's the whole thing. High energy costs are a regressive tax on the people that need it most. If you truly want to lift people out of poverty, I'm getting my coal soapbox here, then you will allow us to mine coal in this country for as long as we can. Allow us, and I don't worry the oil and gas industry, but allow us to frack. Allow us to do anything that can keep energy prices low. States blessed with coal, use all the coal you can. Have a grid that uses those resources. If you have a nuclear plant, use it. If you have oil and gas, use it. Let's use this as a country to grow. We have an incredibly large amount of God-given resources we should be using. So if we have energy, number one, skyrocketing energy prices or shortages, well, shame on us, because that was all made by bad decisions by administrations like the Biden-Harris administration, who made bad decision after bad decision after bad decision to appease radical left donors. That is my belief. I was going to say it's a fact. Maybe someone disagree with it, but I think President Trump is going to reverse course and unlock American energy like we've never seen. And by the way, it's also a national security issue. It's a geopolitical issue of if we can export American energy, it makes people less dependent on our adversaries for energy, by the way. So this is something that trickles down throughout the globe, and we're seeing it. We're going to see it in Europe. We're going to see it in Asia. The growth in demand is going to be so important. So I'm excited because I think the export market also, and probably don't have time to get into that, is going to be something we'll see flourish under a Trump administration too.
Couldn't say it any better than that, Christian. Appreciate it very much. Just encourage everyone to stay involved. I've been like Christian. I'm the one political guy who shows up at the Thanksgiving dinner table and folks ask questions and things. What I've been saying to them is, listen, folks, the next 2 years are going to be the Super Bowl. There's a generational opportunity here. We're either going to take advantage of it or not, but the stars have aligned to do some things. So we encourage everybody to stay engaged. We'll keep feeding you the good news through the On Track and through these meetings, through these webinars. Encourage folks to come out for the conferences this year, because we're going to have a lot of good content for keeping track of this. It's gonna move fast. There's going to be a lot going on, so we encourage everybody to stay engaged. Melinda, anything else that we need to cover before we dismiss the class here? Using one of my favorite phrases from the Zoom era, it looks like I get to give you back 3 minutes of your time, like I ever owned it to begin with. Appreciate everybody coming out. Christian, especially, thank you for taking your time to talk with us today, and for all the good stuff that you're doing back there in our nation's capital for the industry. So really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks to everything that you all do at NCTA, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody on the call. It's going to be a great 2025. So thanks for having me today.
All right. Thank you, Christian. And thanks everybody else. Merry Christmas. We'll see you after the new year.